Good evening, everyone. I will call tonight's meeting to order. Thank you to those attending in person tonight and those staying engaged by watching our recording at a later time. The public is reminded that if they wish to speak during community comment, they will need to fill out a speaker form located in the lobby on the table and turn it in to Board Secretary Kim Coven, seated at the end of the table on my left. Comments will take place during the designated community comment portion of our agenda. And before we dive into tonight's agenda, I want to take a moment and introduce those seated at the table with me. To my right, Superintendent Degner, Directors Eastham, Williams. To my left, President Clausen, Directors Finch. Vice President, I'm sorry, I just gave him my role. Vice President Clausen, that's why he's looking at me like, no. Directors Finch, Lingo, and Board Secretary Coven. And first up on our agenda, we have our student representatives. And first up, we have Tate High and Evan. Is Evan here? Hi. Coming up to the podium. We're looking forward to hearing from you.
Hi, my name is Evan Noriega, and I am the school representative for Tate High School. We have had some exciting happenings at Tate. Tate held a basketball game during the 6th period, hosting Metro on Tuesday on the 6th. The entire school and staff came out to support the basketball players, which I played in, which kind of got destroyed in, but you know that's okay. Let's see what else. Tate had a job corp tour on January the 30th, 2024. They went to tour the factories and see how, the facilities and see how the program works. Many students were very interested about the program. The girls recognizing their own warrior within GROW group at Tate is partnering with Longfellow to mentor and foster relationships with younger students. Our next visit will be this Friday, the 16th. Our PBIS data shows that students received 23 positive to 1 redirect. These positive recognitions include postcards home, positive office referrals, positive emails home, student of the month and all nominees, as well as PBIS tickets. I hope that you guys are enjoying your monthly newsletters, and we are always enjoying highlights and happenings at Tate. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up, we have West High and Cindy.
Hi everyone, my name is Cindy Wang and I'm the rep for West High, and happy early Valentine's Day. So to start off, the Science Bowl got 9th place last weekend, so that was exciting, and we had 20 students play at the Metro Honors Orchestra on last Saturday as well. Course registration is happening right now, so that's something I'm glad about being a senior. And so our counselors are doing individual meetings with students, so that's very nice and efficient. As for sports, we had 3 girls wrestlers qualify for state a couple weeks ago, and they performed well. And recently we had the state championships for swimming, and we had the 200 medley relay state record and state championship, and then also the 100 fly. As for boys wrestling, we had 8 wrestlers qualify for the state wrestling meet, and we had 10 speech and debaters qualify for nationals. Our boys and girls basketball team have had an amazing season, and now we are entering postseason, and our boys are playing Prairie in like an hour, so that's exciting. Reem Kurja from West also was recently accepted into USSYP, which is a Senate program, and she will receive a scholarship and also travel to DC for a couple of days. So that's exciting. And Andrew Dong, a senior, is actually a Koch scholar. So he was one out of 150 out of 180,300 and nationwide like competition, and he will receive a $20,000 scholarship. So that's also exciting. And boys state qualifiers was today. So yeah, that's all I have for today. Thank you for listening. Bye.
Great, thank you so much. Next up, we have City High, Lulu and Rose.
Hi, everyone.
Long time no see.
Yeah.
It's been a couple with the winter snow days.
Been a while.
Yeah, and winter break.
I've slept in a lot.
Yeah. So we just to remind you, because we didn't get an update with your follow-up, City High and I know other schools did do walkouts in solidarity with Perry High School, and that was in collaboration with March for Our Lives. And I know that's still on students' minds, and I think it's particularly students are being reminded of that with some of these new district policies with the doors being locked and curtains being encouraged to go on windows. And I think the interpretation is, it's on everyone's mind with this danger of gun violence. And we'll go on to our more positive updates, which Rose can start off with as our journalism editor.
Yes. So tomorrow we're having our Valentine's paper day. So we have a cute little heart design going in the newspaper.
And cutest couple contest.
Yeah, the dogs are winning though, and
Yeah.
they're not people.
Show choir this year, 2 grand champions so far in their season. In our last one, they got best director,
Outstanding opener,
best choreo,
daytime champs,
people's choice,
and best choral.
and shout out to Aaron Walker for getting best director. Donate a yearbook, Rose and I's initiative with Student Senate to get students who are on free and reduced lunch free yearbooks in their senior year. We ended up being able to raise enough money for 80 yearbooks, and a total of 65 were requested. So whereas 65 students will be getting free yearbooks this year at City High.
The leftover money will be going to next year's graduating class too, and hopefully they'll continue that project.
MESU, our multi-ethnic student union, is once again celebrating Black History Month, and we will have the second year where a Black History Spirit Week will be planned for students.
5 of our bowlers also qualified for state.
And 12 wrestlers qualified for state.
Yeah. Oh, Singing in the Rain. That's your stuff.
Singing in the Rain rehearsal started, and as tech, I always brag, you all should come because we are going to make it rain on stage with real water. Tech is making this going to be very, very good this year. I'm very excited.
The dance team also went to nationals. I heard they went to Disneyland, which is, good for them. Good for them.
Jealous. And then Powder Buff is volleyball, where I think it's just a men's volleyball tournament, which will be happening with Student Senate hosting it this year. And it's always fun. We have Powder Puff at the beginning of the year, which is women's football, and now we're going to do men's volleyball.
Shout out to our treasurer again, Marguerite Frank, for getting another A on her calculus test.
We updated you last time that you got an A, and we like to let you know that she's continuing her streak here. Yes. So thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Great, thank you. Next up, we have Liberty High, Kai and Oriana. Liberty High? Okay. We will move on to our ICEA update from President Brady Shudd.
Thank you, President Malone, Vice President Clausen, Superintendent Degner, directors. I feel some pressure for the calculus teacher. I mean, we got a little streak going as a fellow teacher. I don't want to see that broken. Obviously, we had a meeting in advance of this, the budget finance meeting, and I wanted just to say to the district and to Superintendent Degner, and I know that Adam and Nick put a lot of work into that, and Chase as well, and other folks up here, that I really appreciate the transparency that we have and how forthright we are with information. That has definitely not always been the case, and I've lived through a fair number of budget cuts in the district in my course of time here. So just thank you for that. I think that there are hard conversations, but they're made easier with that level of transparency. And we do have, I just want to keep on our radar screen, I know we have a legislative update later on in the meeting, but there is still conversation about the investment that the governor had proposed in her budget of $96 million for hers was a teacher pay plan, but I think that there is some conversation that's happening around the state capitol for investing in educators more broadly. So I think that's a good opportunity to take that investment proposal at its face and say, we would love to see $96 million invested in the salaries of our public school educators. And it's still alive. It's not yet decoupled from the AEA bill, which there are a lot of opinions on that one. But if we could get that decoupled and, have that investment, I think that could do, a lot of good for us here in the district. There is a placeholder on SSA. That's not yet been decided. They've missed the 30-day deadline on that. And, of course, we are advocating for a minimum of 4% in SSA just to keep up with some of the costs that we're facing. So thanks again for the transparency. And just know, of course, that we're your partner in all of this. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Next up is community comment, and just a reminder to those interested in speaking tonight, you do need to fill out a speaker form located in the lobby on the table and turn it in to Board Secretary Coven seated on my left. Thank you for your interest in the Iowa City Community School District and for your willingness to share your comments. You are reminded to give your name, address, and topic on which you plan to speak about. During community comment, persons may speak to the board about topics relevant to the district. Speakers who make comments are reminded that they are responsible for their own statements and may be subject to legal action for those which include hate speech and that are threatening, harassing, or defamatory in nature. It is expected that speakers will address the board and each other with civility and abide by the stated time limits. All community comment directed at non-agenda items and agenda items shall take place at the beginning of the meeting and shall be limited to 4 minutes per speaker. Speaker time limit will be displayed on the screen above Board Secretary Ms. Coven at the bottom and around the other screens in the room. The initial comment period shall be limited to 1 hour. Remaining community comment, to the extent necessary, shall take place at the end of the meeting. The board will not engage in any discussion during public comment. The role of the board during this time is to listen. Any individual who does not abide by these rules or otherwise disrupts the meeting may be asked to leave and/or referred to law enforcement. First up, we have Cara Deemer Graham. If I mispronounced your name, please just correct me.
Hi there. Oh, can everyone hear me? It's Kara, but that's okay. Good evening. My name is Kara Deemer Graham, and I am an ELL teacher at Hills Elementary. This is my 2nd year at Hills and my 6th year in the district, and I'm also happy to have taught at Weber, Twain, and Shimmick. There are many rumors circulating that the district will consider closing Hills Elementary due to budget cuts that need to be made. If that's not true, then please disregard, but I'm going to proceed under the assumption that that is a possibility. Before the board potentially makes a decision that would devastate students, family, staff, and the community, I implore you to consider the many unique circumstances surrounding Hills and work together alongside us to explore other options to reduce the cost of keeping our school open. Our district's policy is all in for all kids. The first statement you see on the ICCSD website is, every student, every family, whatever it takes. It is important to acknowledge that for many of our families at Hills, whatever it takes means more resources than the average family in our district. Looking at the school and district snapshots, Hills has a significantly higher ELL and low SES percentage than the district average. We have students without clean drinking water, without internet, and with food scarcity at home. We have many students who recently arrived in the United States, often with little to no formal education and little to no English, with very few resources at their disposal. At Hills, we provide many of these resources for families, often with money from our own pockets. Being a small building, every teacher realistically has a chance to form a relationship with every student, and thus we are better able to serve their individual needs. The community of Hills has also been a phenomenal partner for us over the years. If these students were to be moved to a new building, most of the costs needed to provide students the necessary resources and services wouldn't change. We know smaller class sizes and a close-knit, supportive community are imperative to student success, and Hills provides both. We even received the honor of being named a National Blue Ribbon School a few years ago. Many people at Hills share frustration surrounding the situation regarding our school building. Originally, we were slated for a new building, and that has since been retracted as far as I know. We have lost a large amount of support staff already due to cuts, despite our students' needs remaining the same or greater than ever. We have not even received many basic repairs to our building. Meanwhile, the purchase of the Tyler Building or the Center for Innovation, which was a significant cost to the district, was not included in the facilities master plan. At this point in time, no one has reached out to us yet, our staff or our community, to explore other cost reduction options. However, we would love to work together with the district to find solutions that are best for everyone. I know you will look at the statistics tonight and see the cost of keeping us open, and it's a lot, but I encourage you to look at the faces of the children and the families and community members whose lives would be impacted if the school were to close. Small populations matter and small communities matter, and we know that equity doesn't always mean equal, and I think it's imperative to keep that in mind moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, and please correct me if I mispronounce your name, Vivian Cordula.
Yes, good evening, everyone. My name is Viana Kadura, and I'm the founder and director of Mariam Girls Club. We have been communicating via emails, for a period of time, but I never got a chance to stand in here and meet you face to face. So it's good for you to have a face for me. So I apologize for not being here a long time ago, but we've been going through so much sufferings, and our community in a great need of work, and so much work need to be done to uplift our community as Muslims and as minorities, as Arabs here in town. A quick update to make you aware that I have constructed a consent to authorize me to advocate for our Muslim students here in town, anyone who attends the school district. I constructed a formal release waiver and authorization for Viana Kadura to advocate for those parents who have no voices and for some obstacles or reasons cannot reach the school district. They're gonna sign on it, and anytime we have an issue with our Muslim students in here, I will be the one who's talking to you. And that's based on the willingness of the parents and their needs. And I'm gonna share this with you via email too. Now, I appreciate the comments that Mr. Digner had made before, addressed during the last meetings, but I have to clarify something in here. Yes, most of the things that were questioned and demanded seems to align with the district goals and plans. But till today, no major impactful actions were taken. It is alarming to me to know even previous incidents within the districts in which not only students were silenced or suspended, but also some teachers who tried to humanize Muslims and also who tried to advocate and teach history as it is were suspended or released from service. So that's very alarming. So it seems that everything that we've been going through, it has a history in the school district. It's not something new. Please know that our demands aren't a flare, so it's not based on what's going on right now. It's not due to the ongoing genocide that is occurring as we speak right now in Palestine, with more than 12,000 children being massacred and killed right now. And I'm a Palestinian too. So just imagine me standing here trying to advocate for our children who are still living while coping with the loss of our children back there. All initiatives born out of crisis can produce important changes, but responding to a momentary flare-up as opposed to long-lasting structural inequality and corruption limits the extent of possible changes. Changes require addressing and teaching the root of the problem, primarily located in the history of the US policies and practices that created Islamophobia and led to the dehumanizations of Muslims, which all got embedded within the school's core curriculums and adopted by all educational institutions. Real change requires understanding and approaching the problem as part of long-standing practices that will not evaporate with quick fixes during momentary crisis. or genocides or scandals. It requires a paradigm shift in our understanding of the problem and its magnitude. If all educational institutions always consider the long history of violence and inequality in the U.S. when devising solutions rather than responding to a momentary crisis, a more just and inclusive future would be possible for our Muslims and for our children here in town. Much work needs to be done, and we will continue to do whatever in our capacity to protect and support our children. And I will be meeting with most of you again soon, and I will continue to advocate for our children regardless of what goes on, regardless of the laws and regulations of the state. I've been living in a different place where they try to silence me from advocating for the minorities, and I will not repeat that mistake by abiding to their rules and regulations. I appreciate your efforts and your time. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes our community comment. Next up, I would entertain a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
Move approval of the agenda for this evening.
Seconded.
Board Secretary Coven, ready to vote?
Online voting is open.
I'm a yay vote, Kim.
All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. And before we get to consent agenda, were there any questions from directors regarding the bills that were reviewed this cycle? Seeing none, are there items that directors would like to have pulled from the consent agenda?
I'd like to pull Appendix 9.
Appendix 9. Are there any other items? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda minus item 9, Appendix 9.
So moved.
Second.
Board Secretary Cohen, ready to vote?
Online voting is open.
Sorry, something's in my eye.
All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
That takes us to the item pulled from consent agenda, Appendix 9.
Thank you, President Malone. Actually, I'll hand it over to Superintendent Degner. I asked to have this pulled so we can look a little bit closer at some of the proposals for our Center for Innovation.
Yeah, thanks, Director Finch. So the one I wanted to highlight with you this evening was the Phase 2 on the Center for Innovation. You see there, we're asking for your approval of design contract. And you know that we've been over on the second floor for the Center for Innovation and the new professional learning space. And this next phase really would be the next step in the vision for what the Center for Innovation could be. So currently we have our online program housed at the Center for Innovation, our teacher leadership program, special education, district technology, and that large professional development space that we had talked about, the ESC no longer being sufficient for. We didn't have enough learning spaces. But more than that, I think what we're really hopeful for at the Center for Innovation is that you see a space where you have administrators, students, and teachers all engaging and learning together. And so something that's always been important to me is a way for our staff to also interact with kids frequently and to be on site and have that same experience, I think would be especially powerful for the district-led team. We see that there could be learning from teachers, teachers learning from kids, administrators learning from students and teachers. And so this design contract would really look at that bottom floor and then also the third floor, which would eventually serve as the offices for the district team that is currently housed at the Ed Service Center. Part of the original need for this project was, we had went beyond space-wise here for things that our teachers were now leading in the work they were doing and hosting and engaging in. And so at some point, it will no longer be efficient for us to probably be in two spaces. And so this would design it out. At that point of having the design complete, we would come back and talk to you about construction costs and present the design to you and get your blessing or approval to go on with it. If for some reason we didn't want to go on with the project at that point, we definitely could refuse to do that. One other note on there is there's a storm shelter requirement. This was a requirement that came to us after we had purchased the Tyler Building or the Center for Innovation. And before we can have any student occupancy there, we have to have a storm shelter that would be able to serve that as an education space. So that was an unanticipated cost. It was actually something that happened that legislative session after we had purchased the building. And so we do need to outfit that as well. So you kind of have three phases there in the design contract, some of the learning spaces on the bottom floor, the storm shelter, and then eventually a design out for that top level of the Center for Innovation. So we're due back to you with a report out also on our Center for Innovation leadership team and some of the work we've been doing and examples we've seen and some of the actionable steps we've taken to add some innovative programming to the district. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have or any logistical steps, but just kind of wanted to try to paint that picture for you about how we hope to eventually see that, but also with the understanding that this is a contract for the design work at this time.
Directors, any questions, comments for Superintendent Degner? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion.
I move we approve Appendix 9.
Second.
Is there any additional discussion or further discussion? Hearing none, Board Secretary Coven, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. Next up is our public hearing for the 2024 West High Single-Use Restroom Remodel Project. Vice President Clausen.
Now is the time and place for the public hearing on the proposed plans and specifications for the 2024 West High School Single-Use Restroom Remodel Project. The Board of Directors set the date for this public hearing on January 23rd, 2024. Notice of public hearing was published in the Iowa City Press Citizen on January 24th, 2024. The district will receive bids on this project at 2 p.m. on February 15th, 2024 at the Facilities Management Conference Center, 1137 South Riverside Drive, Iowa City, Iowa. Notice to contractors was published as required by law in multiple statewide plan rooms and on the Iowa City Community School District website on January 24th, 2024. Are there any questions from the board? Are there any questions from the public?
Thank you. We will close that public hearing. Next up is policy review, and I will turn it over to Director Finch.
Okay, thank you, President Malone. So we discussed these at our last policy and governance meeting. The 500 series, there were some changes to wellness regulations, cumulative file maintenance, change to the substance use policy that's also detailed in our policy primers, change to documentation surrounding physical restraint and seclusion, and an information sharing agreement with law enforcement, juvenile justice, and UAY. As far as the policy primers, that dealt with responsible use of technology and social networking, transfer of funds to the teacher salary supplement without board action from PD, TAG, and teacher leadership, and then change to fund balance reporting.
Great. Those are listed below as action items, so there will be a call for further discussion if needed at that time. Moving on, our first discussion item is inclement weather days, and I will turn it over to Superintendent Degner.
You know, we were on a streak not having to talk with weather, but I have to talk about it tonight. So we've had some nice days here in a row. This is just a little bit of a follow-up to some conversation we got into in agenda setting at our previous meeting. But our inclement weather guidelines are, of course, posted on the district webpage. There's some time thresholds for when we try to make those decisions. You guys have seen me communicate out if for some reason we're not going to meet the deadline on one of those time thresholds, that we may wait till the next morning to make a decision. We had a rough January. There was a number of days in there that we got a heck of a lot of snow. We had cold temperatures and we had ice. And so we about had the whole trifecta there. A couple of those days, I think, were on the border and created some questions for members of our community. A temperature hung on right on the border of our guidelines the whole day for the 30 minutes or less of frostbite time. And then the other morning that was icing, we knew it was going to get better throughout the day. It was just hard to know how soon it was going to get better. And so, of course, student safety and our staff safety about getting to and from school are of paramount importance in each of those. The cold day cancellations, we have pretty strict guideline there that I know a lot of people follow and are familiar with, that talks about the 30-minute frostbite time or less. And so you can see that National Weather Service graphic on there. That's our biggest point of data. And then the snow and ice, like I explained last time, is a little bit more subjective, right? We try to work with our snow team, the city snow teams, surrounding districts, what information the state of Iowa communicates out to us about the roadways, the National Weather Service webinars. And so really we try to accumulate as much data as we can before I have to make a decision about whether or not we can have school. And so like I said, we're on a nice streak here. There is a request here later in the meeting that I know we'll talk more about with an option of virtual learning days. But as I communicated out to the school community, if we would have another cancellation because we are out of extra time over our 1080 hours, we would move that April 19th date or ask you guys to adjust the calendar to approve that April 19th date as a additional school day. And so we'll put that process in motion here at our next meeting so that we can make that change. And then if for some reason we get to the last meeting, we have to approve that, and we don't think we're going to need it, we could hold off on it. But I do think it'd be wise to make the change to it as needed or if needed, and then we wouldn't have to bring action back before the board. But happy to answer any questions you have about inclement weather or where we're at in the process. But otherwise, we'll talk virtual learning here later in the agenda.
Are there any questions or discussion from directors?
How many days do we typically build into the calendar?
Yeah, so we had roughly about 6.5 more hours, the equivalent of 6.5 more days of hours built into our calendar. So usually that's sufficient. We've had a few less built into our calendar as we've done some more scheduled days off into the school year with cultural representation days or any break days that we provide. I think in 1 year I remember up to maybe 8 days extra over the 1080. And so now we're down to 6.5. And so if we have those six cancellations like we've already had, we really don't have any additional room of extra hours. So short answer is about 6.5, Mitch.
So if we do approve the use of the virtual learning days, is it something that you would use with the first snow day, or would that kick in after we sort of got into a danger zone area where we're accumulating a lot of snow days, or what's your vision for that?
Yeah, I think that's part of what I wanted to have the conversation with you guys on is like, what is a, order of preference? I mean, we've done some work with Brady and his team about what order of preference might be there for staff. And I think there was some consensus on the April 19th, that we're asking, eventually for you guys to edit the calendar there. But beyond that, we have some other options we can explore, right? We could take away some Thursday PD time and add some hours to the student day that way. We could consider adding some minutes to the regular student day for the rest of the year. That would accumulate some time back for us. Or we could consider the use of the virtual learning days as another option. I don't think that's probably a preferred option by any stakeholder group, but it is an option available to us. And if we don't have formal board action that says that that's okay to use those days, it's not an option for us to use. So then we do need to explore one of those other ones. And so definitely happy to take your guidance on where you would like to see that fall in the order of priorities. And maybe that gives you a little think time as we approach the other item about if that's something you want us to consider utilizing or not, and then also where that might rank in order of preference for the board.
Any additional comments or questions, Director?
Director Malone, I'd just like to express my confidence in the superintendent's judgment that he's exercised so far this year, and I expect him to exercise over the next several years too, in terms of making a specific day an inclement weather day and canceling school for that day. To me, this is one of the difficult things that superintendents have to grapple with, and it's one of the things they cannot get wrong. You cannot have school on a day when the weather worsens during the day and children then are subject to some risk. So I appreciate the superintendent's judgment so far, and I'd like to express my confidence in him.
Great. I agree. Thank you. Okay. Hearing no further discussion, we will jump into tonight's first presentation, which is middle school programming. Superintendent Degner, did you want to?
Yeah, I'll just fill some time here while Lucas gets set up to go. But Lucas is going to provide our middle school programming update for you. And so we've had different reports back to you guys as far as construction update, programming, hiring updates along the way. And as we head towards spring here, we know that we're in full gear towards scaling up our transition to middle schools. We've done a communication out to staff, and we've done a parent communication, and buildings are obviously being active too and communicating to those 5th and 6th grade parents that will be arriving at our middle schools next fall. So with that, Lucas has got it pulled up, and I'll let him take it from there.
All right, thank you, Superintendent Degner, and I appreciate being the opening act for the enrollment report today. So that's fantastic. So I just want to go through a few different items. Some of this you might have been like, I think we've covered this before, but I think it's also really good to kind of reiterate some of the work that we're doing, both from a curriculum update. We're going to get into just briefly where we're at with our hiring and staffing, and then lastly with that intramurals clubs, and then what we're doing for orientation and getting the information out to our families. So again, I want to kind of go through where we've been, and it seems like we've been doing this for many years because it's a big undertaking, but it's just been over a year and a half where we really started this work really intensively. If we take a look at the work that we've done so far with the curriculum work, and again, I'm here speaking to a group of people that did amazing work and are continuing to do amazing work and trying to provide additional opportunities for our students in the classroom. So what we really looked to do was revamp that program of studies, again, looking to provide additional opportunities that weren't necessarily there for our students, where we just kind of had our program of studies that existed for years and we just didn't really make any changes to it. So I'm really proud of the different courses that we offered to our students and getting feedback from them. We've done now 2 different surveys of students. Our first survey of students was earlier this fall, right before we left for winter break, where we polled current 7th and 8th grade students about the classes that you want to see, what is not there that you want to see, and out of these types of options, what would you prefer to take during your 7th and 8th grade year in your electives? We then took all those results. We had about 25 different course offerings. And just in the last couple weeks, we've had just under 1,900 current 6th and current 7th grade respondents. It's what we asked them to do. And thank God kids are much more smart. Is that even a word? Much smarter than I am in regards to rank order. Again, I'm sorry about that. So we had them take those 25 different classes and kind of put them in order of what they'd love to see first, all the way through. They're not interested at all. So again, 1,900 response, which is great for us. We can use that data one of 2 ways. We can see exactly what it is, what are the courses that we want to offer, and the classes that kids want to take. And then those buildings can help use that for their staffing, with their scheduling for students, and also the scheduling for their staff. So again, we just wrapped that up here just in the last week or 2. And we're going to kind of go through what those survey results were here shortly. We're then able to take all that data to talk through the feasibility of what classes can we then realistically offer, and who are those people that are going to be in front of the students to teach those classes. Some of them are a little bit more restrictive for the types of certifications that are needed, and some of those more restrictive ones are often sometimes the hardest to find. So that's kind of the process that we're in right now for some of those courses. And this is kind of the last item, but this is ongoing right now through our curriculum coordinators and our teachers, is really looking to develop those courses if they're not currently within our program of studies, looking to see things that are already out there and types of curriculum we can replicate, or things that we're developing in the midst in collaboration with our teachers. So again, I want to go through, you can kind of see 2 different things here, what 6th grade is different and how it's different than 7th and 8th grade. We've talked a lot about what the 6th grade day will look like, and we've referred to these as exploratory units. And when we say exploratory, all these students, every 6th grade student throughout our district, doesn't matter which of the 3 buildings they're in, will go and cycle through each of these 6 different exploratories. So there's not necessarily choice with how those courses are offered. Some of them are Chapter 12, State of Iowa requirements that every 6th grader in the state must take, such as art and health. The others are what we base upon either currently existing within our system or as an introduction for further classes they'll take in 7th and 8th grade. So again, 6th grade is more of a fixed set of offerings. 7th and 8th grade is more of what our families are accustomed to with the more elective-based options. And that's where we get back to that survey that I'll kind of go through here in just a little bit of how our students cycled through each of those responses. And you can see there, and I'll highlight it here shortly in a little bit as well, because we're very excited about the offering number 6 there with 6th graders. BizTown, I'll kind of go through what that's going to look like in collaboration with our partners from Junior Achievement. So again, I mentioned 25 different offerings. I didn't put all 25 on there, I just went with 18. And what you're gonna see here, this is just the total raw results of the just under 1,900 respondents from our surveys, and we took a mean. What you'll see here is it's just strictly based upon the average of where that was ranked in 1 through 25 order. We also are taking a look at the standard deviation, so we kind of know how those were separated from first or last choice. If you take a look there, there's a little key there at the bottom. Those asterisks, if there's 2 asterisks, are courses that are new to our program of studies this year. So one thing that I'm proud of is the fact you see a lot of different asterisks on there. It means we're getting student input and student feedback about what it is that they want to take in their 7th and 8th grade years in those electives. And what you see here is just the culmination of all those different respondents. One of the things, if you remember back to last year, one of the things that we really wanted to prioritize is getting our students out of study hall. We have, in some cases, students that are taking 1.5, 2, sometimes 3 study halls in a given day or every other day. There's a lot of explanations behind it, but that is one of the main things we want to take a look at as far as getting kids out of study halls. Now, there's a time and a place for when study halls have to exist, but a student take that many study halls means they're not involved in it. They're great opportunities for them to explore what those career pathways and what types of interests they might have later on in life. So that has been our goal. One thing that you do not see on this, because by the time we had to submit this, I did not have the data. Our tech data team did a fantastic job of putting it together, a workbook in Tableau that takes into account every student in our current middle school setting and the number of study halls that they're taking. So I can filter it anywhere from 0 study halls all the way up to 4. So 4 means they've taken maybe 2 in the first trimester, 2 in the second trimester. So what we wanted to do was take a look at, we have these results here that you see, but how do those results change, if they change at all? How do they change with our students that are currently in study halls? Because we want to know what are those courses that those kids want to take instead of being in study halls. Again, there's a lot of explanations, there's a lot of reasonings for why students are there. But what we also are tasked to do is provide high interest and high rigor classes for our kids so they can take part in those rather than being in those large study halls. So what you do not see here is how those results vary. What I can say is those top 15 are roughly about the same 15 from that other divided cohort with the students with study halls, but what you'll see is a typical shuffling of 1 or 2 spots. Where we tended to see high interest is the FCS area and industrial tech. Hands-on, high engagement. It's not probably a surprise to many of us that have been in front of students. That's exactly what they want to see, and those more offerings is what we are tasked to do with our student schedules next year. One of the things that I mentioned, this is one of those 6th grade exploratories now, is that partnership we're doing with Junior Achievement. Junior Achievement, if you've been in a building that works with Junior Achievement, they're fantastic. But I probably don't speak for only Iowa City, but also other area districts that probably don't utilize them to the capability of what we could. So we are actually working yet this spring to pilot with some of our teachers to see how our 6th grade students are interacting with BizTown, that curriculum that all students will do. And I try to think back, like when did I learn about personal finance? When was I first exposed to personal finance? And the thing, and I hope my teacher, my 8th grade, I think it was Miss Myers, I hope she's not listening to me say this, the thing that I took away the most from there is how to write a check. That's the thing I remember most about finance. And probably didn't do a great job of listening beyond like what goes where, because I probably had a few bounce checks growing up through college and everything else. So, but again, I try to think through how can we get more of that personal finance. And as you saw from our last slide, this has been a surprise maybe to anybody that's seen this. Number 9 is personal finance. If you were to say, Lucas, I'll give you $1 million if you can guess where that's going to put, I probably would have ranked it in the bottom of the 25. But this has been a high interest for our kids in the first, when we had them go through the 25 and when they ranked it. I'm happy to see that's there. So what BizTown does is works with 6th graders to really lay that foundation for how to become more financially intelligent. So what you kind of see there is what those goals are for BizTown. We've taken our staff through, and I'll kind of go to the next slide here. We have a sixth grade elementary pilot. Again, what we want to do is to make sure that the time that we're allocating toward this next year, these are kind of our guinea pigs right now to see, is this feasible? Can we do it within the time that's being done? Or what are some things that we need to alter before we offer it to every single sixth grader in our district next year? So we have 7 teachers that are currently teaching sixth grade throughout our district that are piloting this program involving 250 plus students. And you're going to kind of see down there at the bottom, it's really a huge marketplace. Kids become consumers, they get an allocated budget, and they have to try to figure out how they can spend that budget and what ultimately they should prioritize when they only have a limited amount of money that they can spend it on. So we're really excited about that experiential-based learning that they're going to have as part of that. The 25th, 26th, and 27th, they're actually going to be over at the Center for Innovation. Junior Achievement comes, sets it up, runs the whole thing through volunteers, funded through volunteers. It's going to be quite the experience. One of our local districts and college community had this last year that a couple of our staff members went to see. Some of our staff members are very well aware of it, and some of them might have students in those other districts that can't speak highly enough about that opportunities that kids have with BizTown. So we're excited about that, and I'll be sure to get that on your guys' all calendars. So if you can attend, I think you'd love to see what our kids are doing, and then how we're going to transition that into every sixth grader next year. When we take a look at the delivery model, and this is probably one that we won't be able to go too far in depth with tonight, but it's been a topic of conversation throughout this year, and it's been a topic of conversation that we're going over with our administrators, going over with our staff, to making sure that our students are not being pulled from their elective classes or from their exploratory classes. Oftentimes, our students, whether it be our English language learners or special education students, the more number of goal areas that they have sometimes means the more times that they're pulled out of the classroom. So what I've tasked our special education staff as well as our English language learners, we need to do everything we can to make sure that students are not pulled from PE, they're not pulled from music, and they're not pulled from these exploratories. So what that's going to mean is more push-in support than pulling out support. So again, this is not necessarily, I can't tell you exactly where we're at right now with it, outside of the fact these conversations and also the staffing that we're using with our middle schools is to making sure that this remains a priority with our sixth grade, our 7th and 8th grade models. As we continue to refine them, our 7th and 8th grade models will resemble somewhat the same, but what we're looking to do from a secondary system is to make sure that our special education students, in particular at our middle school and high schools, are involved in more of those CTE classes, and then they can be involved in the classroom a little bit more so than being pulled out. So that's a continued work that we're doing. So we take a look at our special education, our ELL students, as well as our ELP students as well. Those are things that we're keeping in mind, that we're pretty much throwing everything out there, what's going to be feasible, with the ultimate goal of getting kids involved. Now getting into a little bit of our staffing timelines. We've gone through the staffing multiple times. We just wrapped up our second round of hiring the week of January, I think Friday, January 26th, as we were wrapped up round number 2. So again, our goal from the very beginning, we need 42 sixth grade teachers in our system. We currently have 42 sixth grade teachers in our elementaries. So we're almost there. I'm proud to say that our elementary principals have been great throughout the entire process. Our junior high administrative teams have been doing a great job of getting those teachers involved in those interview processes, to making sure that they're aware of what middle school is going to look like, either as a sixth grade teacher or any of those elective areas. But we're almost there. We've almost filled nearly all of our gen ed placements. Our goal from the very beginning was to get as many people in there that want to be at the middle school, so we don't have to just move people around. If they have no inclination ever of wanting to be in a middle school, and then we tell them they have to go there, that's not great for anybody. So that's been our goal from the very beginning, and we're almost have all of our spots filled up at each of our 3 middle school sites. Where we know that there's going to be an area of need is our FCS and industrial tech and world language. So we had an interview last week for an FCS teacher. We have a couple coming up for industrial technology. So those hard to find areas, we've talked about Iowa City being a destination district. We get people here because people want to be here. So we're not just saying that we're not going to immune from those challenges, but we're excited about the opportunities right now with those candidates that we do have. And then we'll continue this spring. Obviously, we've had some additional jobs that will need to be filled in addition to those elective and exploratory areas, but we'll be working through, and we communicated what that hiring timeline will look like earlier today with our administrators. if you've ever been in a middle school, one thing that's really important is to make sure that students feel involved. 7th and 8th grade are obviously involved in those interscholastic opportunities. They compete against others both in our city and outside of our city. 6th graders are not necessarily allowed to compete. They don't compete with other districts or other schools within the city. But just because that happens doesn't mean we don't want to take any opportunities away from kids. We know if we can get them involved after school, it leads to involvement during the school day and a higher level of success for our students during the school day. So I just want to walk you through what our typical process looks like right now for students that have a strong passion for a club or intramural. They come to their administrator with an idea. I want to see a chess club. The administrator takes that idea to the staff. Is there anybody interested in leading a chess club? And that's how it organically begins in the building. One thing that we talked about in our junior high meeting a couple weeks ago is we need to be very aware of the opportunities that we need to offer to 6th graders as after-school opportunities, whether that be in the classroom and more game-based, theme-based, whatever it may be. And we also need to look at some things that are going to get students active. One thing I want to caution us on, though, is what becomes very difficult because space is always an issue. So to have a basketball intramural during basketball season or a basketball intramural during wrestling season or volleyball becomes very difficult because your teams are cramming for spaces right after the school day, so it becomes very difficult. So whether we need to stagger or be more creative with opportunities like running club, we've had some communications about how things that are going on in the elementary, can they transition to 6th grade? So while I can't tell you exactly what we're going to be offering to intramurals and clubs next year for our 6th graders, I can tell you right now that we're beginning those conversations with our administrators and with our teams. We know when kids come into us, we know those high interest areas that are going to be there for our kids, and we need to make sure that we offer them to our kids and to our families. And then lastly, if you're a parent of a 5th or 6th grader, you've heard from your incoming or your building principal that you'll be soon having in middle school. So our administrators either have or will be conducting the elementary visits by their junior high staff, which includes counselors, administrators. This also includes parent information sessions. A lot of those are being done through webinars here this year to create the flexibility for families to be able to participate even if they can't get there. Scheduling sessions with students to ensure that our incoming 7th graders next year start looking at the schedule that they can take next year, making sure that our staff then has the time to make all those schedules, not only for kids, but for their staff. And then looking later this spring about getting our 5th and 6th graders into the middle schools. Knowing that we've got now 2 classes to transition over next year. So we've got anywhere between 700 to 800 new kids coming into the building next year. So we know that those building visits have to look a little bit differently than what they did in the past. So again, this is the busy time of year for scheduling. So we're in the midst of doing that, and it'll continue over the course of the next couple weeks. Questions?
Directors, are there questions, comments?
That's if you could understand it because speed.
Was I talking fast again? Well,
You're
mocking
good.
here?
Director Williams?
With respect to the 6th grade athletic opportunities, I know that the Iowa State rules are they can't compete. Are there prohibitions on them practicing with 7th and 8th graders, or is it just a competition prohibition?
Practices and competitions can only involve those. For athletics, can only involve those 7th and 8th
So
graders.
so practices are included.
Correct. Yep. I apologize for talking so fast.
Yeah, could you just
Somebody
go through-
should have stopped. You want to start
Can you
over?
just go through that again?
Yeah, I'll start over. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Building off of what Director Williams was just asking, so we know that the junior highs have a lot of clubs. I know especially like Northwest Junior High where my kids went, so many to choose from. So are those open to the 6th graders as well? Those clubs that are already existing for 7th and 8th graders, or do they have to have their own clubs?
I don't see why not. There's no type of restrictions that are out there for the types of after school, like those more informal opportunities for kids. Those will not be based upon grade.
Any additional questions, comments?
So at what point will you have some numbers on, so once kids register, I guess when are we gonna know kind of the numbers for some of these? Because like later, we'll get to the enrollment report, and like, for example, industrial technology at our high school level is super low in that enrollment report. So this would say, well, these kids seem to be more interested. So I guess when are we gonna know maybe some harder numbers?
Yeah, so when we take the staffing and the scheduling piece is a huge puzzle because it not only involves the current junior high students and the current junior high staff, it also involves our high school staff as well as our elementary staff. So we know that specials in particular at elementary, there's not as many needs for sections. So we know that there's going to have to be a need at the middle school to increase those sections that are out there. So, the high school in the course of the next few weeks are doing their scheduling process. So we would love to have a better glimpse of where we're going to be right around spring break, if not when we first come back from spring break. I know I can tell you right now, our junior high administrators would love it as soon as possible so they can start working out that skeleton schedule.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, just seeing that list is great. All the work is really good. I appreciate the breakdown of the way sixth grade, kind of those exploratories. And I too, the personal finance piece. I love that kids rated that highly. I mean, that's exciting and, so necessary. Is something that every one of our students is going to have to deal with as an adult.
Great.
So Luke, I'm wondering how 7th and 8th graders are being talked to about what's going to happen next year, if that's something we should be paying attention to, or if we think that they're adaptable kids, really resilient, and they'll handle this work really well.
I think those are great words to explain. Any adolescent is adaptable and resilient. But as far as what we are communicating and how we should be communicating with them, again, the traditional experience of a 7th and 8th grader that's been in our district really is not fundamentally changing a whole lot. So the conversations that they've had with their 7th and 8th graders are the conversations that they're continuing this year as they have in the past.
Okay.
The only difference is the types of offerings for classes.
Okay, thanks.
Great. Thank you so much,
Thank
Director
you.
Polachek. And next up, that takes us to the annual enrollment class size demographic report. And
Yeah, Nick is going to go ahead and handle the presentation for us on the enrollment report this evening. As somebody that used to have to prepare and deliver this enrollment report, it's taken many forms and fashions over the years. And so we've tried to move towards a more condensed version because it seemed like there was numerous pages of somewhat arbitrary information in there that wasn't super informative of the work we do. And so we have a nice overview here for you tonight about district report out about what our data shows. This is a report I'll probably talk to you about when we look at board calendar for next year about when it is most appropriately timed, as it seems a little that maybe it doesn't fit in the calendar very well here in February, and so that might be one we want to revisit where we can use it in a more informative way. So with that, I'll let Nick take it away.
Yes, thank you, and good evening again, Board of Directors. If you didn't get enough graphs during the financial presentation earlier, this is a great opportunity for more charts and bar graphs. So we'll go through a variety of these. One of the reasons we did delay a little bit was so we could actually be looking at more current enrollment as we go through this. So I wanted to highlight that as well. We typically have gone through this in January, so we did move that back to make sure we had our certified enrollment numbers. So as we go through the different slides, as we work through this, we'll have a few different pieces, related to enrollment data, class size, and then questions and feedback. We'll highlight a few of those pieces as we go through this. So our certified enrollment did go down a little bit over the past year. You can kind of see where we have flatline versus some of the growth that we had over a number of years as we move through this. You'll see that highlighted even at a greater degree on this particular slide, where you can see we had kind of two red bars and any times where we've had actually a decline in enrollment. One was a significant decline, obviously, during COVID, and then the other was this classroom year, or this year. Previously, you can see we had great amounts of growth as we worked through kind of different growth periods within the district. This is just the breakdown, and next year we'll see this look a little bit different as we follow up on the discussion with middle schools. The orange bar in the middle will be significantly larger, probably about 1,000 students, roughly 1,100 students that would be then added into that middle level experience, and our elementary number will move down into the 6,000 range as we've reconfigured. So you'll see a slight difference in that, but otherwise you'll see a very similar process similar statistics over time. This is a very difficult chart to read on here, but if you're looking at your slides, you can see how our continual race and ethnicity headcounts have developed over time, and you'll see a correlation in some of these with some of our ELL numbers as we move forward in some of those graphics later on. This is just another breakdown as we look at how kind of the predominant breakdown of the race and ethnicity within our school district. And you can see we continue to become a more diverse school community as we move forward. We're going to jump now into free and reduced lunch. This continues to be a climb. You will see this small dip in here again. That's attributed to when everyone was getting lunch for free and not everyone chose to kind of fill out the necessary paperwork to receive, to be identified as free and reduced lunch, but you'll see that has been a consistent increase over time for our school district, with our percentage going slightly up. This again is a small breakdown of where that predominantly exists. We see more of that at the elementary level. We do find sometimes at the secondary level, families choose not to, fill that out, or the kids don't want it filled out. So we do see some discrepancies there, but it primarily sits, and then you have the dark blue, which is identified as our online program. This is just, again, kind of another demonstration of how this has changed over time. And that continues into this particular piece where we're looking at about 42% of our students are eligible for free or reduced lunch in the K-12 system.
So Nick, could I interrupt here just
Yep.
a second? So is the free and reduced lunch participation rate, are some of those year-to-year differences because of changes in the enrollment regulations, or are they simply differences in family income?
I don't know the full answer to that.
I think it'd probably be hard to isolate out, Charlie, the variable, the change there. I mean, I think from a general trend, you can tell that we're serving more low SES students, but at some point, and especially with the pandemic in there, application submission, like Nick talked about, can have some variance to it. But I was thinking of the other part you asked. The standard for that hasn't changed, though. And so it's really about if we're getting the applications for that. And I think, again, the important trend here is that we're serving more low SES students when we look at, needs or ways to meet the needs of our students. But the standard hasn't necessarily changed, but sometimes the submissions we get definitely could influence that number.
Okay, thanks.
Charlie, I'd add one point. Over the last couple of years, one of the federal programs for families to receive benefits during the summer was run. They had to apply through the school district. Allison would have some more detail on it. So we did see some fluctuation in the last couple of years just because they tied some of those benefits, or they had advertisements through the school district. I shouldn't say the benefits. And so there has been some additional or different overlap with some of the programs through the federal government have been advertised that I think also can play into people providing that information to the district sometimes.
I say, good, thanks.
And again, this is just another illustration of some of the data from the previous slides, and the percent change over time. Next, we get into the ELL, or English Language Learner eligible students, and this is one where you can see that we've had a consistent increase within our population of serving English language learners throughout our school district. Those numbers continue to move up, and we'll see that in a variety of different patterns. Obviously, the increase, there was only the one, again, you'll see a common theme here related to the COVID year, but otherwise we consistently have an increase within our K-12 system of English language learners and the programming that we offer. And the percentage of eligible students also continue to climb, where we're slightly over almost to 14% of our population, of our student population, are English language learners. We're going to slide now into special education headcounts. You'll see in this, we have had a slight increase here of our students who are eligible for special education over the last couple of years. Again, I was discussing with Director Reedy earlier about the kind of impact of COVID and some students that maybe weren't identified during that time that had been identified after that time period. So you'll see that occur on this particular slide, where you kind of have this one stark line that sticks up a little bit higher than some of the others. Typically our increase or annual change is a little less drastic, but there was quite a little jump up there. And now we've had more of a subtle increase across our larger system. And you'll see overall, when we look at the percentage of our students who are eligible for special education, we're still, lower than we were, 10 or 15 years ago, but you can see that that has slightly increased in the last couple of years. Now we're going to switch directions. We're going to actually go from looking at just general district-wide data to get into class size data. We tried to add a couple pieces here just to help see the graphic. We added this chunk where we kind of clustered what are the big areas of class size range, so really the majority of the class sizes. So I'll use City High since that's our first one here as an example of how we can look at these charts. The 35, I just made it so it's a little easier to see the top of the graph. As we know, you might wonder, well, why do we have so many over here in the 1 category? When we're with 1, you may have some students who are taking a course through Edgenuity, maybe a requirement that they need for graduation. So we do have a small number of students in our system who are, that just was the way they could access that particular credit. You may have some scenarios where it would be a special education roster. It may also be some scenarios where students are taking a course independent study. So there's a few different scenarios why that. So in our data, it comes up as if they're in a class size of 1 because we need to tie them to a teacher. It's not anything that we don't have a scenario where we have a junior at City High School just sitting there with getting private instruction from a teacher. Brady doesn't have a class size of 1 during his day. I mean, I'm sure he'd be open to the idea of some private tutoring, but that's not something we're offering. And that's the same case as we get into a lot of these where they're in those single digits. It's typically working with ELL, special education, different things of that nature. On the other end of the spectrum, those larger class sizes are predominantly in our performance musics, right? I mean, those larger scenarios where we have large groups. But if you can see here at City High School, the distribution kind of falls between this 19 to 32 range, with the largest being the largest line right around 26. Similar pattern as we get into Liberty High School. You see the same kind of working its way through. Similar, we have some smaller. Again, we have this jump up of classes here on the 1 and then the largers on the side. And then West High School, relatively, consistent across our high schools. Obviously, things look a little bit different at Tate High School. We discussed this during that financial committee meeting. I mean, this is a programmatic decision that we make, so therefore those class sizes are going to be smaller for some of our students. And again, some of the ones that are maybe really small, may be some credit recovery or other just situations of that nature. When we get into our current junior highs, again, the lower scenarios, Edgenuity would not be an option, so you don't see as many of those in the 1, but you may be working with some students with small class sizes for special education or ELL again, and you can see that our range falls between, again, the low 20s to low 30s. Same exists within Northwest. And then again within Southeast. Southeast had some clusters that kind of got a little higher here, but still that's just looking at, on average about 28 students in a particular class work its way up as we work through our junior highs. We did talk through previous years. We've given you median class size data across the different areas. So we included median, and then we also included mean, so that way you can kind of look and compare and see if there's some differences through this. So those would be some pieces. One thing I would highlight, Director Clausen, you referenced some of our industrial arts courses. Not only it's not necessarily an indication of lack of interest in some of these. In some situations also, there's just a certain number of people we can have in the particular course for safety purposes as well. So we're not going to probably, if you were to talk to some of our industrial technology teachers, they would not say, hey, I want 25 kids in here using saws. So I think it ends up being a situation where we look at, they end up in the teens or different things of that nature. So that would have a different arrangement than maybe some of our others. All of these slides though, especially these charts, these are critical for Lucas and I as we worked with our buildings on staffing and looking at, how are we using our courses, where are the items where kids are interested in, and how we need to best allocate staff. But I did want to mention that, safety does play into that particular course. So you see the same, similar data as you look at the averages. There are some subtle differences between the two, but generally speaking, they're fairly comparable. We took this same premise on our class size frequency chart that we've done in previous years with the secondary, and we applied it to the elementary. You can see we have a much broader range here, where we have some that are relatively small, and some of our these kind of fall within our smaller buildings here, or in some of our buildings where I mentioned earlier during our discussion where they kind of get to that size where it's a little too big to be that one section because of the RAM level to which they're at. So it gets split to two, and that ends up making a relatively small course. I would highlight there's one that's way to the right over there. There is an additional FTE allocated in that particular school, but they're all on the same roster still. And then that teacher is actually assisting in that class and another that's large. It's at Mann Elementary. It's one of our larger buildings there. We did allocate an additional FTE, but just how they arranged it within Infinite Campus, it pulls as if they're all in one classroom, but that's getting broken up during the day. You can see though, we have a much broader range at our elementaries. Instead of kind of that narrow 20 to 30, we're in that 15 to 30 range where the bulk of our classes exist. And again, you can take a peek at median class size at the elementary and by our different buildings, and then again, the average class size through our different buildings. And that leads us to any questions or comments that the board may have.
Directors, feel free.
I got a few, so.
Yeah, go ahead.
First question, I know this wasn't in the slide, but it just to remind myself and anybody else, how many students went on vouchers this year? Is it 100, 101?
Some of these I may be turning to some of my colleagues over here. I was just got the opportunity to speak to the slides, so. All right. Maybe we can go to question 2 and come back to that one?
It goes with that question, kind of.
Okay.
But
I believe it was about 470 total, but the number we lost when we looked at the number who attended ICCSD last year and then went on the ESA program, was about 131.
So, and I sent this to Matt earlier, and if he could comment on it, what has our kindergarten enrollment looked like between this year and last year?
Sure. So 2023, we had 1137 when we pulled it to today, and then 2024, 1089. And I would say what you've seen for a general trend, if you look the last 3 years, even 2022 before that, you almost had 1,200, you had 1199, then you go to 1137, and then 1089. So right now, kindergarten the last 3 years has trended smaller each year.
For this year, would you say that it's trended smaller because of students taking vouchers, or is it more of a enrollment number?
Yeah, I can jump in on that one. So to clarify, the total number of district resident students on the ESA program is 471. As we look at the impact on kindergarten, for most of the elementary grade levels, the number of students on ESA is right around 50, a little below. Secondary, it's mostly around 20 or below. Number in kindergarten on ESAs is 88.
So 88 students on ESA in kindergarten.
88 students on ESAs. So if we compare that to other grade levels, I think extrapolating it probably cost us about 40 students at least.
Okay. The reason I bring this up is when we go to if you could go back to slide 5. Sorry for my voice. Hey, we noticed, you notice right away there is a 110 student dip in elementary enrollment between last year and this year. And one of my larger fears as a community is the kindergarten enrollment, because this is what ultimately defunds public schools. Because if it's 89 this year, then it's another 89 next year. So you're down 180 students from your bottom line. And, it's one of those things that one second. My wife, sorry, my voice is not in the greatest shape, but my wife and I, in a matter of a few weeks, will be participating in kindergarten registration. and we will go up to Longfellow and probably cry afterwards. But that's part of the program when it's your oldest. But it is one of those things that are near and dear to me, public education, and I just want to remind the public that for us to have a public school system, it requires us to enroll our kindergartners in public schools. And for it to continue to be a robust public education system within the city, within the community, to be able to maintain school buildings within the community, it requires continual investment by parents like myself by putting our children within the public schools in Iowa City and North Liberty and Coralville and surrounding areas. Hills, University Heights. Okay.
So, obviously, that's why our preschool program is so important, is to get those students enrolled in our district and to keep them. And so I do have a couple of questions for you, especially about the secondary data.
Okay.
Someone cut me off here. Okay. Some of these larger class sizes, 37, 38, 40, are we talking about any core curriculum there, or what would those be?
I'd have to check.
Okay.
There's some situations, because when we pull this, it's just pull data, so it's hard to tell. In some situations, we do let some of our more advanced, higher, upperclassmen courses float up. I mean, Lucas, if you have anything to add, you might, but I think that may happen in some situations, but without having the exact information from me, it's hard to say, what those particular courses are. Generally speaking, when you see those larger numbers, though, it's not in that area.
Okay, all right. I was just curious. I think, as Superintendent Degner mentioned at the outset of this presentation, we've kind of condensed the information to make it, a little bit easier to, to take it all in. But it would kind of be nice to take a little bit deeper dive into some of those numbers and to see where those class numbers are. Because, what we're seeing is median and averages, and that's across the whole district. So I don't know what it looks like in any particular building. So that would be nice to see. And then it would also, as Superintendent Degner mentioned as well, it would be nicer to see this data earlier in the year too. So if there were some changes that we could make, then we could make them. But
yeah, and we can pull that information. It'd just be a matter of knowing what you'd like to see as a part of the report, and then we can discuss how best to include that in the time frame as Superintendent Degner mentioned earlier.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you so much.
Yep.
Thanks.
Any additional questions, comments?
I'll ask my next one, please. What is the RAM cutoff for elementary schools between level 4 and level 5%? Of free and reduced lunch? I know it's that, but what is the level? Do we know?
Yeah, so we had 3 different levels. So level 3 this year operated anything at 60% or higher. And then we had level 4 was at a kind of 50%, 50 to 59%. And then all other schools were at our level 5.
Yeah. Now, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Director Proud. Next up is our quarterly financial report. And it looks as though it's our Chief Financial Officer heading to the podium.
All right. So there are a couple of attachments. I'm going to focus on this one. I'll make it a little bigger here so you see it better. But this document has a few items in it. I'm going to focus a little bit on our actual revenues and expenses just to start. So as you can see through the quarter ending in December, our revenues of about $95.3 million. It's very similar to what they were the year before. Even though our revenues we expect by year end to be substantially lower than they were last year, and that's due largely to ESSER related income. Most of that was realized by the district late last fiscal year. So it's not a surprise that those numbers are very similar this year. Our expenditures through the end of December, 78.1 million. That's down here at the bottom of the December column. And that's about $5 million less than at this time last fiscal year, which again tracks about where we would expect it to. So we've expended just over 1/3 of what we would expect to during the year. So that 5 million level, as we look to ultimately reduce our expenditures by about 13.5 million compared to where we ended last year, puts us roughly on pace to do so. The one thing I do want to highlight there is as we look at those revenues and expenditures, and especially as I come back to you with the third quarter financial report, one thing to keep in mind is that we do have some elements of our current year budget reductions that will not show up here. So for example, we have some flex transfers that basically transfer authority from carryover funds and categoricals that won't show up in revenues and expenditures. So as we look at, how we're reaching our authority level, and if you compare this to budget documents that we've shared, separately, you'll see that that's I'm going to say a discrepancy, but it's one that is built into the process. So if you're concerned about these numbers not quite deviating from previous year as much as you might want them to, that's a factor to consider. And then the other item that isn't showing up here is this is general fund revenues and expenditures, and that includes special education expenditures. So for example, one of our budget reduction items in terms of impacting that general fund authority is properly classifying, for example, substitute teachers to special education where appropriate. Last year we didn't really do that at all. This year we expect that amount will end up being about $700,000. Again, that is an expenditure. It will show up here, but ultimately in terms of the impact on our general fund authority, it doesn't have an impact. So a couple things that I just wanted to point out there. Feel free to look through some of this. I'm not going to go through all of it in great detail. I will highlight a couple elements down here. So this is our monthly line item budget. This is something that we've tracked with fairly closely throughout the year. So if you go to the very final slide in the presentation document, you'll see that our actual expenditures through the end of quarter two so this is actually actual through the end of quarter two, and then the budgeted for the remainder of the year would work out to 196.9 million. Budget is 197.7, so we're tracking a little bit low. I wouldn't put too much stock into that actually ending up being a little bit low, as it can have to do with sequencing of things like transportation costs that don't necessarily come in on a monthly basis and don't necessarily align year to year. So just to make a point that there's a little bit of fluctuation there, but we are on schedule with where we would expect to be at this point in the year. The other item that I do want to draw your attention to is down here in this chart on the right side. And this is really our aid and levy sheet. This is what we use for those budget numbers. So if you think back to our earlier budget reduction conversations, this chart should look pretty similar. It's the same line items. And then if you look down here at the bottom, you see an articulation of unspent authorized budget for current year. Down here, very bottom of this chart, row 34. And that right now is, or as of the end of quarter two, 737,387, again, very close to what we had shared. One thing I'll note is that we are constantly looking at these numbers, both in terms of what our actual expenditures are as those are realized, but then also in terms of the budget reduction strategies that we identified in terms of making sure that we're actually going to realize the savings that we have there. So even just this morning, I went through and pulled some numbers as it relates to some of the strategies we identified. For example, an alternative to substitutes at the secondary level. That's one that we had talked about. We had built in a number for. We don't think we're going to get to that number, so I reduced that amount. Ultimately, point I'm making is just that this number is something that, again, we're constantly monitoring and updating as we get new and fresh information. Currently, if I were to pull this expected unspent balance number today, it would be closer to 350,000. That's almost entirely due to that one change. The flip side is that there will be positive pressures there as well. For example, some of our savings on building substitute costs, we had forecast that to be 150,000. We think we're going to get a little bit above that, so we're working to refine that. So there will be a little bit of push and pull on that number there. But ultimately, it still aligns with where we would expect to be and what we had articulated to the SBRC. So that's just a quick overview of this report. I do want to quickly mention and share the other attachment that is here. I'll zoom in on this so you can actually see it. And this is just cash and investment totals for end of quarter. So you can look at first and second quarter broken down by fund, so general fund, activity, et cetera. Top table here is cash totals. The second table is investment totals. And then finally, the cash and investment totals. One thing you might notice is that from quarter end, first quarter to second quarter, our cash and investment totals jumped from 105 million to 125 million. That's pretty normal. We get an infusion of revenue that happens during the fall, and then we'll get another one in March. And that tends to drive those numbers up. Part of building those cash and investments, especially for the first row, the general fund row, is because it becomes pretty thin for us when we get into the summer months, where we're still paying teachers who are paid over 12 months, but we receive almost no revenue during those months. So this gets built up in anticipation of that. And you can actually see that as illustrated here by first quarter investment and cash totals for general fund at quarter end, 5.945 million. And then end of second quarter, 24.967 million. So just wanted to draw your attention to that so you see how that works a little bit. And also just to highlight that that's really what we would expect to see at this point in the year in terms of how those numbers are moving and changing. Final thing that I wanted to highlight, part because I've received questions as it relates to this. For the investment side, the district doesn't invest in volatile investments. So when we talk about investments, it's almost entirely in CDs, money market, very little in money market, and then IceJet, which is a statewide system for public investments that guarantees a return. And so we do constantly look at our investments when we have a CD that reaches maturity, make a decision about whether that's something we need to bring into the cash flow side or whether that's something that we want to renew given current interest rates. We are able to receive interest revenue. And on the general fund side, that does add to our authority. It's considered miscellaneous income. So that's a boost for us, especially right now with CDs and other investments generating a decent return. On the capital side, same thing. So if you look at capital projects and bonds, we have substantial investments there, went from 52 to 64 million over the last quarter. We do generate investment revenues there. The one caveat is if it's on something that we borrowed. So for example, we issue a bond, we have some limits in terms of what we can generate in terms of investment revenue compared to what we're paying in terms of interest on those bonds. And so if we go above a certain point, we end up having to pay some of that back. So ultimately, it's just a thing that we have to watch for. Ultimately, that's there to prevent a public entity from essentially just hoarding investments on the taxpayer's dime. So that's what I wanted to go over. Any questions?
Any questions from directors? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That takes us into our action items. And first up is the 500 series policy, which focuses on students. Were there any discussion from directors? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion.
I move we pass the 500 series policies, students.
Second.
Board Secretary Coven, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Next up, policy primers. Any questions, comments, or further discussion from directors?
I just point out that I appreciate IASB and other folks putting together a policy on AI and how that works, just to know that we're addressing it. We're not banning it, and, this is just a new part of the world, and I appreciate that we're putting a policy in place so that folks can, it explains it a little bit and then just explains our policy around it, so.
Great. Any additional comments? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the policy primers.
Second.
Board Secretary Coburn, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast, and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
And our final action item of tonight is virtual learning days. Any additional question, comments, discussion? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion.
I move that we grant the administration the authority to call for up to 5 virtual learning days as allowed for by Iowa law.
Second.
Any additional discussion?
I just want to talk about it for a moment. I know we've built out the infrastructure and we have people in place to do the best that we can do with this, but even so, if there's anything that we've learned in subsequent educational policy, is that online learning doesn't work. As much as we wanted to, I would be remiss to not say it. There's multiple nationwide samples compelling a picture in which online learning does not work at scale, especially in marginalized communities. There was even a paper put out last week by the American Institutes of Research using NWA's MAP data on how online education hurts those that are from the most disadvantaged backgrounds educationally. At the same time, I know that the district is in a position where, as we've added in more days to rightfully represent other cultures and religions, that we've pushed ourselves further into the summer break. And that, which is also possibly not tenable for students to learn. When you're starting to, like I looked at our AY 27 calendar, right now we're projected to go into the second week of June. And, after receiving a couple emails, I've heard it in the communities. This past week, I even just, decided to go and look at where other districts in the area, including the Cedar Rapids metro area, are at on their calendars. Right now, for this year, in the Iowa City metro area, we go to school in the summer either 3 to 8 days longer than any of the surrounding districts. And this includes at least districts and private schools. And this includes even schools that have off one less day to the school year than we do. I would like us to, in the future, as a district, to think strategically on how we can configure our calendars to keep the district from going this far into the month of June, and how we allocate those days off a year, whether it's the length of days or the overall allocations. So that in future calendars, we do not hit this wall of having to go far into the first and second weeks of June, especially when we hit inclement weather days. We all know that global warming is going on, and the weather is only going to get, these type of strange weather patterns are probably going to come again and again and again. Anyway, that's my comment.
Any additional comments, Vice President Clausen?
I'll vote to approve this, but again, and as superintendent, you're like the last resort possible. And I hear what you're saying on that, Director Lingo. Just to point out, on the calendar, I think that's published for Cedar Rapids this year. It says one thing, but I'll tell you, because of snow days, we're going to school till June 7th, and teachers are working on the 10th. So not all districts have built in as much flexibility as we have, but I think the point's well taken that we just need to be mindful of kind of the calendar and its impact on families.
I think the superintendent has shown good judgment with our snow days this year, and I know you'll use the same good judgment with the use of the virtual days.
And my only comment is, and that's going to be part of my directed liaison report, I understand the concern about going so far into the summer, but I think the other flip side is that the impact that we have on recognizing so many people in our community that have gone unrecognized, especially from other districts. And I maybe get the flip side of that, working with a multitude of diverse people on the fact that we do celebrate some of the cultural holidays or represent other beliefs, and we're accepting to that and hearing from teachers that yes, when they get to June 1st, it's like, oh man, I'm still here. But they reflect back on the amount of time that we take into consideration that's oftentimes needed to recharge. And I get the emails from parents as well, and I respond back with the empathy, but also explaining partly why we do what we do. It's a tough balance, but I think our calendar committee tries to take all that into consideration, and I know they will continue to do that given some of the comments that we're hearing tonight and some of the emails that we've received. I don't know if there's other comments from directors.
Well, just to follow up, Ruthina, with what your comments are, while having virtual learning as an option for 5 days a year is not ideal, and for the reasons that Mitch has outlined, not recognizing important calendar dates for students in the district is also not ideal. So to me, we're trying to balance a learning method that doesn't work so well for all students with our need to try to connect as many students as possible to the district and their families to the district in order to become comfortable with their attendance in the district. So it's a more complex thing, I think, than
Like I said, I rightfully believe that these dates should be added, but I'm looking at Cedar Rapids next year, and maybe you can talk a little more on it. They're projected to go 3 days less into the summer than we are, and they're going to have 3 more days off of school than we are.
I think you need to understand that Cedar Rapids got rid of their early release day for next year. And so that's allowing them to change their schedule dramatically. So if we got rid of our Thursday early release day, then our days may look like that too. But then what we give up is PD for our teachers, which is just something that is really essential. Like, I don't know if you want to talk about it, Director Clausen, but I'm curious as to how Cedar Rapids is going to do their PD for their teachers.
Yeah. Yep. So
with
they're
that
going to
schedule
do, so instead of an early release on Friday, they're just going to have set days throughout the year, which, I think these are all great conversations because, I think this idea, we may have heard, well, how much learning actually happens in June? And believe me, I know the burnout you feel at that point, but I'll tell you, when I know we had a big impact, teaching in another school district, when we had those days off in October, the burnout you save from giving folks a break, specifically at that time, because recognizing cultures is critically important, and understanding kind of the patterns, the way teaching staff goes, because the traditional school year isn't based on data. It's not based on research of what's best for learning, right? Just it's farming, right? Like agriculture having summers off. So as we sort of learn these cycles, I'll just tell you anecdotally, I didn't meet a teacher who didn't want to come to work in this district in October. When they were really feeling that beginning of the year, by October, you're really into like, oh my, we need a break. And there are just these key points after spring break, kind of, right now between winter break and spring break, where traditionally you just have this high level. The hope would be, my hope certainly, is that you don't get to that burnout in June because you've preserved it all the way along. Because that hit in October. Now, nobody who's heard me talk would think anything differently than I would love to revamp the way we do PD from an early release day to those days. And I think that's something for the association and admin to talk about and the calendar committee to discuss, just because I think PD is better when it's delivered in that model. But again, because we have the flexibility of using our minutes, I think we just want to get smarter at that. And we're definitely trying some things that other districts aren't doing. And so it's some uncharted territory. And frankly, just personally, and my opinion is, the closer we can get to a place where we have something like year-round school, we're probably going to get closer to something that makes the most sense educationally. Certainly for disadvantaged kids, certainly for kids with learning disabilities, that summer dip is often hard to recover from and often doesn't get recovered from. So I just think we should keep looking at this stuff and we analyze this, giving folks the flexibility, and that to me, that's the key. Do we have flexibility? Are we doing this mindfully and really keeping student achievement at the core? But again, in Cedar Rapids, again, and they had more, we have all Friday afternoon, the whole afternoon. So we have half days every single week. So by getting rid of that, they gained many, many, many days. For us, even if we got rid of Thursdays, we're not going to gain back that much time because we just do an early release that isn't as much. So.
No, I think what I would like to see is the legislature give us the flexibility to start before August 23rd. And I do know that there's a bill, Brady, I always look at you because you are the best with the bills, but maybe giving us that. And so I'm hopeful maybe that we'll see that so that we can start earlier. I'll add a little different spin on this. I'm really happy to see that and I echo Director Finch's comments too, that I think that you've done a fantastic job of using your discretion, and I have no doubt that you'll continue to do so. I do appreciate that the next step is the April 19th date instead of a virtual learning date. And I think there's a lot of pacing that goes on, and now that they've missed more than a week in second try, that really throws off the pacing, and there's a lot of things happening in the spring. You can think of our AP students who are preparing for that AP test. If we add the dates on at the end in June, that doesn't help any of that type of instruction. And so I love that we found a day in April before the end to help teachers get their pacing back on track a little bit. So thank you for doing that. I'm a big fan of that.
Superintendent Degner, looked like you wanted to
Yeah,
make a comment.
I think there's relevance to everybody, what everybody's saying, of course, right? I mean, there's a lot of different factors in there. I think where Director Lingo started with, how do we just continue to look for smart ways to do the calendar and what is the tipping point with what families want, with what our educators need, with what's best for kids. I think all of those things are what we're trying to do as we build a schedule. And have we found the exact perfect solution? Probably not, right? And but I think it connects back to a lot of the things you guys said about what are important to us and then how we try to build out that calendar and where are the opportunities for improvement. And I do think that's what the team tries to look for every year, for ways to improve it and ways to bring you guys their best work. There are some fixed rules like you guys talked about with, whether the start day is, what the length of the teacher day is, our instructional day, all of those components factor into it. So I think it's a conversation we can continue to come back to too, but I think, just hearing you guys talk about it and have the conversation is valuable to us too, right? Because that helps inform the way we can take back some of that information and work together on it and just keep trying to get better. I guess the one other thing I was going to add is I do think we have some other districts that have tried to replicate some of the things we've done, right? And I think, Brady communicates that to me regularly. I think that, they do hear that this has been something that's of interest to other districts and that they would like to try to model it after that. But there's some, we're in the middle of a frustrating time for parents right now. I do want to recognize that, right? It was not ideal to have 6 snow days in January, have a 4-day weekend, right? I don't think anybody that was designing the calendar would have anticipated that's how it was going to go. So I get the frustration and very empathetic to that concern, but just thanks for having the conversation, and we'll take that back and see what we can do with it, or if we need to come back to you guys with some more conversation.
Thank you. Any additional comments, questions?
Who knew virtual learning was going to be
I
the big
know.
discussion item?
Hearing none, I would entertain a motion. Oh, yeah, it is,
Yeah.
sorry.
Online voting is open.
Thank you.
I'm a yay vote, Kim.
Thank you, Director Clausen. Did anybody get it?
I'm a yay vote too. I mean,
I'm gonna close it and open it again. on my idle too long. Clausen,
Yay.
Malone,
Yay.
Eastham,
Yay.
Williams,
Yay.
Finch,
Yay.
Lingo.
Nay.
All votes have been cast, and the motion carries with Directors Clausen, Malone, Easton, Williams, and Finch voting yea, and Director Lingo voting nay.
Okay, next up is Director Liaison Report. Are there any items that directors would like to report out on? Director Williams.
I will, because it's a fun fact, and I'm in the mood to share. I attended the Johnson County Supervisor Assessors Board that I sit on it. So because we get our funding a great deal from our property tax, the school board is allowed a seat at the Assessors Board, and we supervise them, and I've done that for the last several years, and it's actually really enjoyable if you're kind of, I mean, Adam, you would love it. If you are like nerdy and like numbers. But I learned today that in Johnson County, our assessed value in the past year has increased by $2 billion. And it took, I think Tom said it took 50 years to reach $6 billion of value in the county. And then in the last year, we've increased by $2 billion, which is a fun fact I have given to all of you today. And it's really mind-boggling to kind of comprehend the growth that's happening in this area and the increased value of when we buy new property to build buildings and all of that. I mean, there's a lot of stuff happening in Johnson County that you wouldn't have known about had I not shared.
Well, thank you.
The more you know.
I wonder, a fun fact I wonder now is how many times the Johnson County Assessors Board meeting has been brought up at this stage.
Yeah.
Maybe zero. Maybe
Not
zero.
one.
Director Finch.
Oh, sure. I wanted to share that I went to the open house for the Healing Prairie Farm, which is a collaboration with UAY and community, and it's an incredible resource for our community and possibly for some of our students that we have. And so I know that they have, they're going to have a forum for elected officials, so I would encourage anybody who's able to do so to attend that on the 16th, I believe.
Great,
And
thank you.
President Malone, I might say that I also attended the Celebrate World Hijab Day event held on February 1st at the North Liberty Library. And what struck me was that, one, there were a huge number of kids there, enough for an elementary school, entire enrollment. And also, there were a lot of books about hijab, sorry. And I hope that we have some of those books in our libraries. I know I can't do that now, but it's just something I think we should just pay attention to as we go forward here. Thanks.
Great. The one thing I wanted to highlight, I did attend the Lunar New Year's celebration on Sunday. I alluded to the fact that the district was brought up quite a bit, and thanks for recognizing the holiday, but also because the host, the Eastern Iowa chapter of the Asian Pacific Islander American Public Affairs Association presented the district with the Excellent in Diversity Award for all of the work that we have continued to do to not only recognize different cultures, but putting our students' beliefs and needs first as the district. So I was happy to accept this on behalf of the district and Superintendent Degner, who couldn't be there that day. So I just wanted to thank those who are actively out there doing the work, boots on the ground. Thank you. Your work does not go unnoticed, and it is appreciated by the wider community. With that, we will move on to the legislative updates.
Yeah, and I'll try to keep it brief. President Malone, Brady did a nice job on the onset talking about a couple of the larger issues. There's a ton of bills out there to pay attention to, and hopefully after Funnel Week this week, we can really narrow in on what ones continue to command our time and attention. He touched on the AEA bill. I do think we'll see something that comes out at committee this week. We've been told that what comes out of committee this week will probably not be the final form. There's been some amendments the governor's office has shared with superintendent groups that'll be considered, and I'm not sure those will actually be produced in the legislature when the bill comes out of committee. But I don't think that one's going anywhere for a while. I do think we can anticipate that conversation to continue throughout the session. And I would just say from a realistic perspective here in Iowa City, we'll have to take a hard look at what that means for what's best for kids here in our district, depending on where that legislation lands. And we've been working to do an analysis based on what we know about it right now, but that'll be a piece we probably need to come back to the board with. Some things that we're hopeful are changed for consideration in the bill would be the time that we would have to commit to that. Originally, it was said April you would have to make a decision. There's some department oversight concerns that I think we have. The loss of the media dollars, of course, is another cut to public schools, that if this is an important change, then why not just let the districts keep all the media service dollars or allow those to continue to be flowed through to the AEA. So those are a few of the items that we continue to work for. And then the $96 million for teacher salary, like Brady talked about too, and how that will be distributed to districts. We've been told the districts would be divided into tiers to receive their allocation, mostly based on student enrollment. So of course we'll be in the largest tier for that. But I suspect that might be the lowest allocation for the larger districts, and the smaller districts are going to need the largest allocation. So we're interested in finding out how that will work and how that would process. I know there's a lot of fears in districts, as you've seen these big steps in other states, that you elevate everybody to 50,000, but then they have to stay there for 3 years because you can't afford any kind of an increase beyond that. So those will all be concerns and questions we have as this go along. There's a school safety bill that I'm sure caught your attention with mandated SROs or private security officers and arming staff. Other priorities we've heard coming out of the governor's office would be work-based learning. Early literacy is especially important to the department and the governor. And we already kind of touched on the school calendar issue, that maybe we could get some movement there. So I do think we'll see something around literacy. I don't think they're going to go full-scale retention, that it would be some type of a retention conversation that you could have with the parent, and some information to maybe help guide that. Work-based learning, it sounds like there's some exciting opportunities. I will say I'm encouraged by Director Snow's work around standards in Iowa, and the way to revisit our standards that haven't been touched for a long period of time, and to maybe do some work along curriculum lines. We have given feedback that, of course, people will be skeptical of any kind of menu of curriculum choices and what maybe agenda is behind those curriculum vendors, but at the same time, we are pretty wide open throughout the state about each district's choosing the best reading curriculum or the best math curriculum they think. And so having some guidance on that, I think, as a leadership team, we think could be potentially beneficial. Again, knowing that people will be suspect about how those vendors made it to the list. But those would be a few things that I've learned in the last couple weeks, and I think things you should watch for. Happy to answer any questions you might have based on things you've seen.
Any questions from directors?
Is the SRO bill, is that SRO per building or per district? Like one SRO per building within our district, or, well, if it passed?
I don't know. Brady, you've probably read it more specifically than I have. I think it's per building. That's right, yeah.
And is the state paying for that?
They're suggesting a payment, yes.
But it's not, it's secondary, it's high schools, isn't it?
9th through 12th grade.
Yeah.
It's not our elementaries.
Okay.
It's going to be the problem with any new commitment of funding, I think we just are all very suspect of. I mean, who's going to argue with teacher salaries? But at the same time, we also know what revenue the state's bringing in 3 years, and how are they going to sustain those salaries? Is that going to be local dependent? How are they going to continue to fund 2Ed systems? How are you going to pay for SROs? Even if you get it off the ground with ESSER dollars, from the current school safety money that they promised, they don't have the funds to sustain those types of projects. And we know the whole conversation that goes along with school resource officers or security, right? So, number of issues with that.
And just a reminder, the next legislative forum is Friday, February 23rd.
Oh, yes, thank you.
Okay. Next up is agenda setting, and the first meeting will be on February 20th, our Education Committee meeting, which will be at Kirkwood Elementary. And we will be discussing, it will start at 4 o'clock, and we will be discussing PBIS. Then that takes us to our Policy and Governance meeting, which will be on February 27th at 5 o'clock. The 600 series and Policy Primer, Policy 216.2. And the last agenda would be for our regularly scheduled meeting of the directors. We will have an education showcase, as well as our consent agenda, public hearing, and equity update, and a budget presentation.
And the one thing I need to eat crow on already, Director Finch asked the question yesterday about the audit, and
Yes.
Adam and I learned today that I don't believe we'll have the information back from the state for that. So it's probably going to be that March meeting that you guys know happens late in that month in March. So the audit's in the draft agenda right now, but we'll probably be removing that in the next couple days.
And as a reminder, feel free to share items for discussion for future meetings or this meeting. I don't know if Superintendent Degner, you had items.
Yeah, there's one preschool I think we'd like to come back to. We had hoped to do that at actually at our last meeting and weren't ready to go with that, but we've had preschool registration, so it'd be nice to update you guys on that progress. Ruthina mentioned equity update, Ed Showcase, certified budget. Center for Innovation's another one I want to come back to. I don't know that we'll do that on the 27th, but potentially either the 27th or the March meeting to update you on some of that leadership team's work there. And then, of course, we'll have some type of a budget item on the 27th in the agenda that focuses on reductions, not just the certified budget. So those would be the items from me.
So just for a future operations meeting, I would like to kind of take a look at what our criteria are for inclusion into the Appendix 9. I know that's not on here now, but I can bring it up at the next meeting.
And President Malone also had some discussion earlier about having a presentation about the county's community violence intervention program.
Yes.
And I think you guys may be handling
And I
that.
know that was an item that Superintendent Degner and the team was working on, trying to get that slotted in.
We have Rachel scheduled for March.
Okay.
So County Attorney's Office will be here for the March meeting.
Okay, thanks very much.
Great. Are there any other items? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion.
So moved?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night. Meeting adjourned.